Hello, everybody. I am the mom of Corey Daniely. He is the young man who came up missing last August in or around Kerman, California. I have posted on many different social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, but this is my first time on YouTube. And I've watched and seen a lot of YouTube videos in regards to this case and in regards to my just the entire scenario regarding my son. And I want to say thank you to everyone who has taken time out to post, talk about, and push the search for my son. I'm going to give a synopsis of this case on here, and I'm also going to give my own personal views of this case. And eventually, I may do a live to answer some questions. It's taken a lot for me to get to this point. Every video that I've made, every interview that I've done, it's hard because it just solidifies this situation that, my son is not here. He's missing, presumably deceased. And that's something that any parent don't like to think about. I have an outer body experience kind of every time I say those words that Corey is missing or Corey is deceased. It's like I can't believe that I'm talking about one of my children in that context. It's unbelievable. And it's something that I have not gotten used to. But I also have on my big girl underwear, as in, as much as it hurts me, as much as I grieve and I try to find a way to heal, I'm also mad because the people who did this are still walking around and they think that what they've done is okay. And it's not. No matter if they did it to my son or the other people that they've done it to, because we're going to get to that. So let's go back a little in time to the last time I spoke to my son. It was around July the 27th. My son called me and I answered his call. And actually, he called me twice. The first phone call I didn't get to in time because I was at work. And I honestly, I was in a meeting at work. And so he called and it went to voicemail. And he called right back. And it's just like whatever was going on in the meeting, for me, it went to mute. And I answered that call. I got up and walked out. And I answered the call. And it was my son and it was Corey. Hey, Mom, what's up? How you doing? I'm on my way to LA. Everything that Corey was always doing, he always called me and shared with me and told me about it. And so he was like, I'm on my way to LA. He had a job that he was dealing with, and he also mentioned something about a producer. And I was like, okay, I'm proud of you. As usual, I always let Corey know that I am proud of you and whatever you're doing, with your music. Because Corey had been a musician since he was 6 years old. That is when we put the drumsticks in his hand. And from that point, by the time he was 13, he was playing the trumpet and the piano and all of that stuff. He never had a formal lesson in his life. He this was just something that he just naturally gravitated to, was music. It's something that was in my blood, and so I kind of passed it down to him. And that was just his love, was music. And he was just very talented, and he was very gifted. He was reading. He didn't so much as read music. He had an ear for it. He could listen to anything, and he could play it. And by the time he was 16 or 17, he was writing his own music. He was playing his own music. That was just his love. He had a love for music unlike anyone I had ever seen. So fast forward again to this phone call. We talked and we laughed, we joked. He was telling me what he was doing. He was telling me again that he was on the road on his way to LA. I believe from LA they were going to stop over into San Diego. And from there, he was making his way back up to Santa Rosa because he had a singing gig, performance with his band that coming Friday, August the 10th. So I said, and he was like, yo, Mom, can you cash at me $10? And I was like, of course, and I didn't know he was with anybody because up until that point, Corey, had his own truck. And I know he was having mechanical problems with his truck. So at that time, I didn't know whether it was fixed or not. One would assume that it was fixed. However, it was during that point that after all of this, I found out he was with Zach. I had no clue who Zach was before all of this happened. No clue who Zach was. But I said, okay, Corey, I'm going to cash up you a little change, and then your birthday is next week. So I'm definitely going to put in some extra special because I always try to do something special for my kids on their birthday. That's how I was raised, celebrate their life while they're here. And so that's always been a big thing for me. When they were little, they got the cake, the candles, the gifts and all of that stuff like that. And as they got older, I always give them a little change or, you know what I mean? But I always tell them that I love them. And so I sent him a little money. And I told him, I said, because we were going into the weekend, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to give you a call on your birthday. He knew I was going to call him on his birthday. And again, that's how we did things on my birthday. Corey is the first one to call me on my birthday every year, every Mother's Day, every Christmas, every holiday. When I was West Coast, we were together on the holidays. When I left the West Coast, he was always to give me a phone call. So that was that. I texted him about 3 days after that. Once I cashed out his money, I cashed out him, and I said, hey, babe, enjoy yourself. Be safe. Stay out of trouble. And, I'll holler at you in a few days for your birthday. He was like, oh, thank you, Mom. I love you with all these U's and hearts and exclamation points and all of this stuff like that. And he was just very excited, very high on life. So fast forward to August 7th. That morning I was on my way to work and I made a small video wishing him a happy birthday and sent it to him. Then once I got to work, because the type of job I have to open the office and I work in patient care. So I'm doing all of that and he didn't respond. So this was about 6:30 my time. that I sent the video. Didn't respond. I'm thinking, okay, it was early in the morning. He probably been out celebrating, yada, yada, yada. So maybe it had to be about 10 o'clock, 10:30 time frame in the morning, August 7th. I sent more messages, more happy birthday emojis and all of that stuff. And hey, babe, I love you. Happy birthday. Enjoy your day, that type deal. And I looked at my phone periodically throughout the day, saw that he didn't respond. And that was during the day. I saw that he didn't respond. And so I'm like, okay, he's probably enjoying himself. He's probably in LA, really enjoying himself. I mean, one would think, right? So by that night of August 7th, I looked at because my daughter and my son-in-law, they were actually visiting. So I took them to the airport because they had a night flight. Took them to the airport. They're flying back to California. Took them to the airport, looked at my son's Instagram, because majority of the time we messaged each other either on the gram or it was straight via text message. So I see that he hadn't viewed any of the messages that I sent. So in my mind, I'm thinking, maybe he's just really out having a good time, So the next day rolls around, August 8th. And I sent out another message. He didn't respond. A red flag still really didn't go up because, in my mind, I'm like, well, hey, maybe he lost his phone, or, something of that nature. You just don't think the worst. So still looking at his, hey, ain't heard from him. And then I go on to Instagram to see if he's posting anything, and he hadn't posted anything. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, maybe he lost his phone, again, something of that nature. So finally, that evening, I was actually at church, and my daughter sent a mass text to myself, to my husband, and to the rest of my children, saying, hey guys, look at this. And it was a message from Zach Styles on my son Corey's page saying, hey, this is Zach. Has anyone seen or heard from Corey? I have this phone and I have his backpack. If you see or hear from Corey, let me know. So that kind of didn't sit well with me. But then again, I'm like, hey, maybe he was partying or something and left it, maybe lost his phone or something like that, But the red flags did not go up with me until I actually spoke to Zach Styles. Once my daughter posted that message, and we all got to talking within the group, my husband and my other children, I got on the road home. But before I got home, while I was on the freeway, I called Zach via Facebook Messenger. And I said, hey, this is Corey's mom. What's going on? You posting on Facebook that you have his phone and his stuff. Basically, did something happen that he left his stuff? So Zach went on to tell me, that Corey had got into it with somebody at this house that they were at in Kerman, California. And I'm like, Kerman? What in the world is Corey doing in Kerman? Because Corey has never frequented Central California. He lived in Santa Rosa in Northern Cal, the Bay. He was raised in San Diego. So my question was, what was he doing in Kerman, California? Zach could not give me a straight answer. Okay. So then Zach says, I said, well, who did he get in an altercation with? And I want to tell you this, the more questions I asked, the more unhinged Zach Styles became. Because after he answered one question, if it was shady or shoddy, I just went to the next and I kept asking questions. Because I'm like, dude, you ain't on the up and up. But you ain't dealing with the average person either. And he said, well, he couldn't really tell me what the altercation was about. And I'm going to get back to that part. Because then I said, well, who was the altercation with? And he said, oh, this guy, Dylan. I'm like, Dylan who? Dylan Thomas. That's what he told me, Dylan Thomas. The guy's name is Dylan Thomas. Okay, so I go back again. Okay, well, what was the altercation over? He couldn't tell me. As a matter of fact, he told me, well, Corey was sitting in the house. He was on his phone. He wasn't even doing anything. There was something going on, and somehow Corey got pulled into it, and, Corey was just trying to defend himself. I'm like, okay. I said, well, how did he end up walking away from the house? Did he walk out the house? Did they fight inside the house? And he's like, no, they fought outside. I'm like, okay. He goes back and I said, no, I go back and I say, you can't tell me what they were arguing about. He couldn't tell me. I said, okay, well, did they throw blows? Was Corey bleeding? What was the scenario? Oh, I don't know if he was bleeding. I can't remember if he was bleeding. I said, okay, then what was he wearing? He was wearing red sweatpants and some sneakers. I said, well, where was his shirt? He didn't have on a shirt. This is what Zach told me. I'm like, well, you know what? I got 3 boys, and I've always raised them. Don't take your shirt off. Don't go out without a shirt in public. No one wants to see that. That's funky looking. So my boys knew that. And I mean, you don't know what your kids do when you are not around them. Obviously, in my son's case, I'm keeping it real. However, I do know one thing about Corey. The only time you would see him without a shirt is when he was in water. Okay? So Zach said he didn't have on a shirt. So I said, well, what happened to his shirt? Did he take it off? Was it torn off of him? He couldn't tell me that. So then I said, well, Zach, when Corey walked away, because Zach persisted to tell me that Corey didn't know anybody else in his house but him. That's how Corey ended up at the house in the first place. Because I see a lot of people comment, oh, well, Corey's hanging out with all these other people. What was he doing there? Corey didn't know anybody at that house but Zach. He was riding with Zach. In Corey's mind, they were headed back up to the bay. But this was Zach's plan, or Zach lured him to believe that they were stopping at this house and that they were going to be on their way. But it didn't quite work out that way. How do I know? Because, and I'll get to that. But what I'm saying is Zach had a whole lot of I don't knows to every question I asked. And then when I pressed him, he would lie. Well, Zach, how come you didn't go after Corey? If Corey didn't know anybody else at this house, and this is your so-called friend, and your friend walked away from the house at 3 to 4 o'clock in the morning of August 7th, why didn't you go after him? Zach told me these words. He didn't go after Corey because Dylan went after Corey. And I'm like, the person in question that Corey had the altercation with went after him. And he said, yes. I said, okay, and what happened after that? He said, Dylan came back because he couldn't find Corey. I said, and then what in pray tell did you and Dylan do after Dylan came back and Dylan couldn't find Corey? He said him and Dylan sat on the porch shooting the breeze until daylight of that morning. And he was able, because they were locked out the house, and he was able to go back in the house and get Corey's stuff. Yes, this is what I was told. I asked Zach, what were you doing while the altercation was taking place? Did you at least go and try to break it up? I mean, if this is your friend. He said, no, I sat Indian style on the ground, crying and praying that they would stop fighting. I said, did anybody else in this house go out and try to break this fight up? And from what Zach said, no. So I said, Zach, what do you think happened? He said, oh, I think Corey hitchhiked back to the bay. Now, see, this is where Zach has me twisted. Because he thinks where I live in my current location that I know nothing about California. Now, I think that's what all of them thought. However, I know a whole hell of a lot about the Central Valley. And I do know that Kerman and Santa Rosa is about 4 hours away. So I'm like, this fool expects for me to believe that my son hitchhiked 4 hours back to the bay. I was like, okay. So now you playing with me and you trying to insult my intelligence. But I was like, okay. So by then, I said, well, did you think enough to call my grandson's mom? And I said, because where are you calling me from? That's when I find out he's calling me, he's talking to me on Messenger through my son's phone. He says, I said, well, since you have my son's phone, can you contact my grandson's mother? Because if he's stranded or anything like that, maybe he's found a way to try to reach out to her so that she could help him get back to Santa Rosa. And he said, no, I haven't tried to contact her. And I'm like, you think you ought to try and contact her? I said, better yet, go ahead, take my son's phone and his stuff to the authorities and turn it in. Zach said, I don't do law enforcement. Everything after that is a blur for me, because I kind of got upset, and then I kind of got fearful for my son's life. After that, the call dropped. And that's when my heart sank to the ground. Stay tuned for part 2.